Hello, yes.
Okay, so just for the last point, you're saying that paternal investment is positive. How do you facilitate paternal investment without paternal attachment, without also facilitating female, a little bit of female detachment? Not detachment, but like female, I don't want to say female empowerment, but like female mobility.
I think that, one of the things which I think is really interesting is that we don't really understand very much about what it is that fathers do. I think this is only just starting to receive attention. See, I'm not sure that paternal attachment is about taking the caring role, which mothers do, because there's actually sorry? You may, I'm sure that you do need some proximity, but for example, they found that when they were researching traditional and non-traditional fathers in Sweden, so the non-traditional fathers claimed that they did a lot more childcare, but the evidence actually suggested that they didn't do much more than the traditional fathers. And what's more, it was actually I'll just say, it was actually the tradition, that it means the levels of work, when they say traditional and non-traditional, who was spending the most time in employment. But it was actually the traditional fathers who played with their children more. And I think that there are very different, that what mothers do and what fathers do, my hunch is that it's actually two different things, and that if you got fathers taking over the caring role of mothers, if you got fathers actually acting as mothers, my suspicion is that you would actually lose what the father's role is. But I don't know, because it's not very much researched. So, I think just how do you facilitate paternal attachment? You just have children with a man, and you're just being married, just having a monogamous relationship. That's what we're moving away from. There's an awful lot of single parenthood amongst poorer people. That's what is. Yes, there's much more single parenthood among less well-off people, because there simply aren't males available to support them. That's the source of poverty in British society, is single parenthood, and it's because males do not have the kind of employment which makes them attractive propositions. Women are better off with the state benefits than being with a male who can't provide properly. So I think really, if you want to facilitate paternal attachment, you've got to facilitate marriage and monogamy. Not necessarily marriage, but partnering.
So if you were to look at the value scale of benefits that so also when you're defining feminism, are you saying, because just my understanding of the definition is just the women's right to have equal social, political, and economic, social, as men. And then I appreciate that enables promiscuity, or more like sexual
liberation.
But how do you, is this argument arguing against the less I get that the two are very inextricably linked, but how?
I would be,
because how can you, the benefits of female empowerment in terms of intellectually and politically, because they exist. So how can you?
Well, what I would say, I haven't defined feminism because I feel like we're steeped in it, you know, it's all, but for example, one of the things about feminism, let's take, this is just a really day-to-day obvious one, is that we must have equality at all the highest levels of society. We must have equality in the political sphere, and we really feel like there's a link I really want to show. You know, we really get agitated by the fact that there's something by this idea of the gender pay gap. The gender pay gap, by the way, does not, women are not paid less for the same thing. Women tend to do different things, but we think, you know, feminism is really driven by the idea that men and women should be paid at exactly the same, be doing exactly the same jobs and be paid the same for them. We should have exactly the same access to resources. This is a really, you know, sort of sine qua non of feminism. And I'm actually saying, personally, I don't think it matters if there aren't as many women at the highest, you know, in a particular job. I think that what we do is a result of choice, and that we are different, and therefore we make different choices. The idea of feminism is that we're discriminated against, and that is why there are inequalities. What I am saying is we are different, and therefore we make different choices, and therefore it doesn't matter if they're inequalities, because they're not a reflection of discrimination, they are a reflection of difference. And if you look at the idea, which we just take for absolute granted, that we should have women paid exactly the same in all areas, and I mean, not a day goes by without hearing of a new field which women must conquer. I mean, I'm always asking myself, why does it really matter if there are fewer women in that? I don't think it actually does. And the result of placing a constant emphasis on pushing women into having the same is exactly what I'm saying, that we are undermining our opportunities for finding mates who are at the same level of education that we are. Now, a feminist response to that might be, well, what we should be doing is then, as women, selecting mates who are worse educated and are less able to provide. But how will that actually work out in the long term? In the long term, it will mean that women are the ones who are going out and doing work, and men are the ones at home doing childcare. And I just wonder, if you're a woman who is out there earning while your husband does the childcare, are you really going to be having as many children as the woman who looks after her baby while her husband supports her? I suspect you're not, and therefore I don't think it's a viable long-term strategy. I think that in the end it will be those couples where they're choosing the more traditional formula, where women might work a bit but they're more dedicated to childcare. Yes.
I think, like, I understand these arguments, but like, in modern feminism, for me, I think that it's not like we should push there to be equal men and women in every single field, but like, the fact is that men and women should have the same opportunities to go into that field. And if you choose to, as a woman, you don't get stigmatized for that because you're not being a mother. You don't choose that traditional mother role. Like, you should be able to choose to have that traditional mother role if you want to, and that's fine. Or go into like some high-powered job and not choose to be a mother. Like, I don't think it matters at the moment whether you choose to be a mother or not. It's not about like having as many children as you possibly can.
To be honest, I think we've had equal opportunities to do what we want to do for a very long time, and if you look at policies, they are actually driven by the aim of ensuring that women are earning exactly the same as men. And that is there is this gender pay gap. I mean, we're always having we've got new legislation where companies have to show what their gender pay gap is. Now, this gender pay gap reflects the fact that women choose jobs which enable them to go on looking after their children. Now, the idea is that we close this gender pay gap, which means that women should be increasingly choosing jobs which are the same as male jobs, and these could be more demanding. I think that we've gone well beyond the idea of equal opportunities, because we are looking for equal outcomes. I'm 100% in favour of equal opportunities. Personally, I think we've had equal opportunities to do what we want for quite a while, but we are looking for equal outcomes. If we were not, there wouldn't be this constant emphasis on why is there a gender pay gap, why aren't there as many women in politics. It's equal outcomes that feminism is looking for, not equal opportunities.
So we haven't got equal outcomes because there have not been equal opportunities for such a long time.
Well, I mean, for me, that's bewildering. I've never had an experience of not having the opportunity to do exactly what I want to do because I'm a woman. I think that what feminism does is, you know, as human beings, no men or, you know, men or women, we don't have this freedom to do exactly what we want to do. There's, in a way, feminism sets up this expectation that you can do absolutely anything in the world that you want to do. Well, no man, except for perhaps the most privileged, you know, that is a point of view of an extremely privileged, that's a very privileged outlook. So I think actually we do basically have equal opportunities within our class system.
That looks say women have always had the same opportunities because less privileged women have certainly not got the same opportunities as men. Women are put down in schools, women are put down at every stage of education and told, you know, you live in a university that's a white middle class man's world. That's not giving women equal opportunities. Whether they've got the same opportunity to apply for the same job, maybe, but social society is telling us that actually only white middle class men can get that.
If women are being put down at levels of education, why, from the age of 4 upwards, are boys doing worse, males doing worse than females, boys doing worse than girls at absolutely every single level of education, to the point that there are 35% fewer men at university than women? I think we do have equal opportunities, and when you say that that poorer women don't have equal opportunities, poorer men don't have equal opportunities either. There's, in terms of education, females are way ahead of males.
Yes, but I thought it was quite well known that things that are in our sort of makeup and our nature, like going to a job interview and demanding a higher salary and being more confident and being this male stereotype, get you a larger pay and job.
We have the opportunity to do that if that's what we want to do. We do. I mean, this is human nature. I mean, as for what I've been saying is that these processes of female selection have created competitiveness between men. And if you look over eons, men, and there's loads of data which shows that males are more competitive than women. So males may be more likely to take the directorships or whatever because they're more competitive. We have the equal opportunity. If we want to compete with them, we can. We may actually just be different, and we may not choose to do so. If we really want to. My sister was a deputy chief exec. She actually didn't want to be the chief exec because she just really didn't like that job. So it's actually, I think if we really want to do something, we do have the opportunity to do it. The question is that we're different and we don't want to do it. And I heard a really interesting, it was a talk about, for example, if you look at really high areas of employment, it's like, it was talking about the way that men will work in, I don't know, legal sectors or whatever. And it was kind of this just pointless work. I mean, almost the sort of competitiveness which drives people to do a sport, which I'm very in favour of, but you just do something just for the sake of it, and men will just compete just for the sake of it. And you put a woman into the same environment, and after 5 years of doing this, she's thinking, well, really, I've got better things I could be doing with my time. This is really, like, tedious. Whereas the male might not experience it in quite the same way. They might actually enjoy the thrill of the competition because they're differently constructed. So we do have equal opportunities, but because we're different, we make different choices.
It is about changing society and changing beliefs. I used to work in a school for 17 and 18-year-olds for a sixth form, and you're right, the girls were much more academic, they had higher marks. But you ask them, what do you want to be? And they don't have as high aspirations. You ask the boys who've got lower grades, they think they're going to be the CEO of Lloyd's Bank, and it's sort of like, why have you got this sort of delusion?
Well, you see, the reason that I'm saying it is, I'm saying, well, actually, maybe they're just different, because in the long run, women do have, they do anticipate having children, and they would maybe quite like to spend some time, and for them, maybe work isn't of such central importance. For a male to have access to reproduction, which women have access to without doing anything, for a male to have access to reproduction, he has got to be productively successful. You've got to, as a male, be good at your job in order just to have children. We don't have to be good at our job in order to have children, and therefore the males are driven in a way that females are not driven. And it doesn't really matter, because what I'm saying is that, you know, you can create your females. We could try and keep on driving society forward so that we get our females to be behaving as our males do. But this, what I'm talking about here, is the outcomes of doing that, which is we end up not forming relationships, not having paternal investment. Yes.
So you feel like this is all a very evolutionary point of view, and don't you think there's like higher cognitive beings that we can then challenge and not necessarily go by instinct all the time? For example, there are women who choose not to have children, so we can override our natural instincts, and that flaws your whole theory.
I think that it is really interesting, and I think that one of the things that we have now is that there's much more sort of social, things are passed on socially rather than through physiology. But what I think is that these evolutionary instincts have actually been from, you know, when we first evolved as human beings. And I think that although we are cognitive beings, and that we can, I certainly think to some extent we can not override, but I think we need to go with the flow. And I think that if we go against the flow, I think it probably won't work out. I think that patterns will reinforce themselves. And I was thinking about this just occurred to me, I was thinking about this on the tube. So, for example, we had I've spent a lot of time in Poland, I've lived there, and we had very large-scale Polish migration to this country, and everybody talks about why is it that the Polish men work so hard at the same levels while the English men are not bothering and they just go on to benefits. Why do we have this different pattern? And the reason is because I know that in Poland they've got these really strong family structures where they expect, and the women expect, the men to go out and earn, and they expect the men to bring home the bacon, and if they don't, they ain't going to hang around. Whereas we're not expecting that from men. I'm talking about the working classes. I'm talking about working class people, not sort of the more educated people where we just work because it's interesting. I'm talking about where you work because you've got to survive. So what have we got? We've got a situation where it's actually the traditional patterns which are sort of trumping the more modern patterns, where the males are dropping out because they can get benefits and they see no particular reason for working because nobody's going to marry them anyway. So I think that although cognitive processes are important, I mean, I am open, you know, I'm kind of interested in what it means for the future and to what degree can you override these mechanisms. But I suspect that I don't actually think it's going to make people any happier. And since we had feminism, there is no evidence of women actually being happier. And I just think that it's better to kind of, whatever systems you decide for, you need to pay attention to human nature, because at the moment we're in absolute denial about human nature. There's just this assumption that, you know, male and female is sort of arbitrary. Well, it's not arbitrary. It's really deeply formative, and whatever systems we decide, we need to pay some attention to where we're coming from. That's what yeah.
This is changing the subject slightly, but I just wanted to hear your point of view on one thing. You were talking about male promiscuity, or like wanting to go out and have as much sex as possible, basically from an evolutionary point of view, so they can make lots of children. And then you went on to talk about the paternal attachment and how men get dad if they don't, if they are like away from their children. I just wondered what your point of view was on the kind of phenomenon that we have at the moment, but I think has been around for a long time, of men being very adverse to settling down, as it were, like to actually having children.
Well, I mean, in a way, there's not really much reason to do so, because they can get sex.
What I mean, not by settling down, but like by actually procreating, shall I say. So they'll have, this could be very stereotypical what I'm saying, but like sex with a lot of people, but heaven forbid one of them gets pregnant.
Yeah, I think I mean, it is interesting, and there are lots of interesting things which kind of put, like, for example, contraception, and how does that sort of throws a spanner in the works of sort of evolutionary theory. But I think that there are a lot of disincentives for men, because when if they do partner up with someone and it doesn't work out, they can end up in quite, they have to commit an awful lot of resources without necessarily having access to their mate or their child. So there are quite a lot of risks involved with getting married at the moment, where men can lose resources. And I mean, a lot of these processes are not, like all this evolutionary theory, it's not how anybody's actually thinking, it's just kind of underlying mechanisms of the way that things work. So in a way, I think you could put it the other way round. In the past, a man would have just stayed with one woman because it gave him access to sex. So that would have pushed him to stay with one woman, and the children would then come along and he'd deal with it. But now he has access to sex anyway. So why stay with one woman? And I suppose if she becomes pregnant, he's just got to stay with one woman, or he's got to commit his resources to one child and therefore reduce other opportunities. You can do, and I mean, it's things have changed because we've now got contraception. But I mean, what I'm saying is, it's precisely because you can go and have sex with whoever you want, whenever you want, that someone else later then has difficulty finding, this question, why do men not want to have babies, is related to the fact that you can go and have sex with whoever you want, whenever you want. Sure you can. And then 10 years down the line, you might find that, men are not really all that keen to settle down because there's not really much incentive to do so. Do you think there's truth in what I'm saying, men? Oh, look, you're looking too bashful. I've been saying, no, you're going to deny it all. You're going to... I mean, one of the things about theory is it takes no hostages. It's like, it's not very flattering for men and it's not very flattering for women. These are just basic underlying mechanisms, and of course it's really important. We are social beings. This is not the level at which we operate. We've got all processes of cognition and socialization. These are just sort of underlying tendencies. So it flatters nobody. I think it's just really important to bear in mind this evolutionary background, because I think it throws up different questions. And, we are structuring society. We really are structuring society according to feminist principles, where male and female differences are arbitrary, where we should have completely equal outcomes. And as far as I'm concerned, the role of this is to say, is this actually the best way of doing things? Maybe it isn't. Maybe we need to pay more attention to who we are as human beings and find an alternative paradigm, because I don't think this paradigm is actually serving anyone very well. It worked very well for a situation where women got pregnant very easily, and if they got pregnant, there wasn't much they could do about it. So, where we are now, perhaps it makes a really big difference that we have control over our fertility. When we didn't have control over our fertility, it would have been really important to make sure that we got men to commit to us and to provide resources. So actually, in terms of not having control over fertility, the previous paradigm worked very well. with fertility, with control. We don't need men to commit resources in the same way because we have more control. Sorry.
So I agree with you that, like, from an evolutionary perspective, men want to spread their genes and to increase the number of potential children that he'll have, and that the woman will want to get pregnant and then make a commitment with that man from an investment point of view. So she's supported, and then her child will be supported. I just don't understand how you're linking that to feminism.
Yeah. What I'm saying is that feminism would see all of those as a consequence of tradition. It's something that we can just get rid of. I've got a good quote. This was a book a few years ago, Genderquake. We're in the middle of an historic change in the relations between men and women, a shift in power and values that is unraveling many of the assumptions not only of 200 years of industrial society, but also of millennia of traditions and beliefs. So feminism is saying that that is just a result of tradition and belief, and that we can just change it and create the society that we want to create. And what I'm saying is it's not just traditions and beliefs, it's actually much more part of who we are. And if we want to change society, we need to take into consideration who we are. We need to take into consideration the fact that as women, we do actually have a physiological reaction to the sight of a small baby, or you do after you've given birth. You actually have a physiological response to a baby. A male has a physiological response to the sight of an attractive female. These are deep differences which feminism absolutely denies.
I think it's important in that kind of thing to, like, it's really interesting to understand this, like Polly says, from like an evolutionary point of view, but we need to really focus on the fact that we are biocognitive beings, and we need to understand that the behaviour that we have or do, even if it comes from these really like ancient behaviours that we've had, how they affect other people, and how like we should be able to rise above some of these. Like, it's important to use that to maybe explain but not excuse some behaviours, because you've got people like, for example, Trump going around going, I'll grow out people like pussy, and it's like, people are going, well, he's just a male, it's just male behaviour, isn't it? He's like it's like locker room boys talk, and it's like, no, you shouldn't, like, that doesn't excuse, like, saying that about people or doing that to people.
Because we know better.
Because you should know better.
Yeah, I mean, I'm you know, I do feel we're not, like, these are underlying things that need to be borne in mind. I'm not saying these are not, they're not kind of conscious, the way that we kind of consciously work. They're more kind of how we unconsciously work. I mean, you know, just like, you know, we might find that we actually just properly fall in love with someone, and he does happen to be better educated than we are, and actually it's a cognitive thing. We're really not like, oh, he's better, well, like, he's going to be a good provider. And, you know, I do think, you know, I would agree with you. I do agree with you. You know, we're not reduced to these. It's just bear these in mind. You know, no, we shouldn't. And I don't think that no, we shouldn't encourage those sorts of things. But I mean, the argument, you know, he's disrespecting females, and you know, you look at Miley Cyrus and Madonna, and we disrespect females as well, you know. And if we want males to respect us, we shouldn't have kind of major figures. You know, we shouldn't see it as really acceptable for, you know, what Madonna and Miley Cyrus do is, I think, really no worse than what Trump does in terms of disrespecting female sexuality. No, I don't. I'm not saying you've got permission to touch them, but what I'm saying is that if we encourage, if we completely, what I've been trying to show here is, if you go completely, absolutely strip away all mechanisms of sexual withholding by women, you're also going to encourage bad behaviours by men. These two things are linked. If we give the message away, you know, and I'm not saying that, I'm talking about mechanisms and what happens, and I'm really in favour of overcoming and putting these below, you know, cognitive processes. But we can't separate out male responses to female responses. You know, in a time when females were all prudish and chaste and all the rest of it, well, actually, there probably would have been men who still behaved very badly. But it's still, and I'm not saying we should be prudish or chaste, because things are different now. We've got contraception, and it changes things. But you know, we need to see one set of behaviours as linked to another set of behaviours. Well, I'm not sure what the, you know, when we're just, let's say Miley Cyrus is giving the message, it's very positive what she's saying. We are sexually available, we enjoy sex, we will have sex as much as we want. You know, that's what she is saying, and we're endorsing that. And that might possibly encourage men to think that we're sexually available. I'm not saying it's okay to harass or to hassle or whatever. I'm just saying that it's part of a same constellation of behaviours. And I do think you wouldn't have had a high status public figure. It's difficult. Who knows what happens behind the scenes? I mean, you know, I can't say what happened behind the scenes 200 years ago, because there weren't video cameras. Who knew what male conversation was? I don't know. I mean, I'd agree basically with the point that you can rise above certain behaviours, and I'm not condoning, you know, horrible, disgusting, you know, behaviours like that.
But that's so like, sorry, just quickly. So Miley Cyrus is saying like that's about himself.
Yes, I was
it's like,
about
this is my body and I've got the right to do what I want.
Yeah.
Donald Trump, if he was saying like, yeah, well, similar things about himself.
Yeah, but like, I think it was
but she's also
in a society that we're in, a feminism society at the minute, we're always trying to be like, women are supposed to be these empowered people that, like, I'm still not completely feminine, and like, but from a, you know, just what she's trying to say is like from a biological perspective and like an evolution perspective, like take away like socialization and like society right now.
Yeah,
we're like trying to say like feminism, women should be at the top, women should be this, women should be that, we should be doing all of this. And when you have like one of our like all these role models getting up and just being like, we are complete sexual beings, it kind of is like undermining what the rest of feminists are saying.
No, I don't think it is. I think she is feminist by doing that and saying this is my body. And
she can't.
Having one type of feminism, you're only looking from a sexual perspective.
I mean, what I'm saying is that the fact that we give sex away really freely means that we can't get men to commit. So, in as far as what she's saying encourages that process of giving sex away really freely, it also encourages a lack of commitment by men. You know, I'm not talking about what the ideological implications are. I'm talking about what the result will be, not the ideology of it, just the practical consequence. I think that we have a society where people do give sex away really freely. Maybe it has nothing to do with Miley Cyrus, maybe it's all part of the same constellation. My hunch is it's probably all part of the same constellation. And you know, the fact is that if you do dress like that, I mean, just let's say you copy the styles of dressing of these people, it does communicate. I mean, there is evidence that will communicate sexual availability. No, okay, it's not the same, you know, it's not the same thing as what Trump does. I mean, Trump is, you know, it's not the same thing as, you know, boorish, badly behaved male is, you know.
It's like if I walked down the street wearing a revealing outfit, I'd be disgusted if a man thought it was his right to comment on it. I'm wearing it myself, and just because I'm wearing it doesn't mean that it's right to look.
I know, but you see, I would say
she's saying from an evolutionary perspective that you're thinking about it higher, thinking about it lower. You're thinking about it at a biological perspective.
At a biological at a biological perspective, you are dressing in a way which will actually provoke a physiological reaction in a male. You know, so you know, you can't deny it. the feminist thing is to completely deny that there's actually something different going on with males and females. What I'm saying is there is something different going on with males and females, and if you dress like that, it will encourage a physiological reaction in a male. Most males, I think, are absolutely brilliant at controlling it. I think they really are, and I think it's important to realise how sexually driven males are, to realise how well behaved they are, because actually very, very little of that stuff happens, although the evidence suggests that they are different from females. But you will occasionally get a more badly behaved male, and if you dress in a way that's, you know, that's like that, of all those people having a physiological reaction, one might actually respond to it. So really, if you don't want a physiological reaction, don't walk around in incredibly revealing clothing. I suppose, I don't know, because I'm not a male, but I believe that some males, when they see a female very provocatively dressed, would get an erection, that sort of thing. And most males control all of that stuff. It's a distorted physiological response, because paedophilia is a non-fertile being. So I don't know what kind of subversions of human nature happen that you could get paedophilia, because it's non-fertile. It's really kind of not within nature to respond to a child. So you know, it's not the same thing at all. Yeah, but would you really? But would you? No, but I mean, I'm quite interested in this, because there is evidence that says men are more responsive to visual stimuli than women. So there is actually that we don't respond to visual stimuli in quite the same way, that there is actually a difference there. But I just don't know. Personally, I'm not really, when I see a really hunky, I personally don't have that kind of physiological reaction, because I'm much more turned on by talking to a male who's intelligent. You know, I can see a handsome male and I think absolutely nothing. In fact, I find it a bit, you know, male models, I just, you know, but that's just me. I don't want to resort to personal. So I don't know whether males and females do have the same reaction. No, I don't. I tried desperately. I mean, I'm now a lot older. I remember giving my son a doll. That kind of broke any inclinations I'd had. I mean, because although there's lots of different kinds of feminisms, they are still motivated by the desire that we should have absolutely 50-50 at all different levels of society, which I don't agree with. And they are also, as you say, for example, they should have gender-neutral toys, and, you know, girls should be able to do this and boys. That's because feminism is based on the assumption that the sex differences are not really sex differences, they're gender differences, and they're culturally constructed. And that's exactly what I'm battling against. I'm saying, no, they're not culturally constructed, they've actually evolved over millennia. So I wouldn't go along with any of that. And, you know, and I think, you know, there are basic principles, and, you know, we're trying to get men to be more vulnerable and sensitive, so they'll stay home and look after children so that we can go out to work, you know. And it's like, well, to what end? You know, I don't want to spend, well, I haven't spent. I don't feel that I've personally benefited. I'm just trying to think, have I benefited from feminism? I don't think I have benefited from feminism. I'm a different generation, and so when I was at uni, it was actually like I wasn't married when I got pregnant. I wasn't married. I was a single parent, and, you know, and that made life quite tough for me, you know. And that was an environment, this new freed up environment, which sort of breaks all the mold. So actually, you know, I think feminism wasn't really particularly helpful for me. And I remember as a young person, you know, all this sexual promiscuity stuff. Well, actually, I grew up in an environment which young people must be doing that even more, where you're encouraged to engage in, you know, be liberal, let's say. You know, promiscuous is a bit judgmental, and actually, when you're a woman, I don't think you really come away from all that stuff personally, you know, feeling good about things. So I suppose, in a way, it's exactly my experiences of the disadvantages caused by feminism, and I've never been particularly motivated career-wise. I've always been more motivated by family and children. So I can't actually personally see any ways in which I've benefited from feminism, but that I agree. I would say there are a lot of women who I only learned a few years ago, it has to be said, but I would say, but that's me. I do believe there are a lot of women who have benefited from feminism. I mean, I would hate to say, you know, the situation way back in the 60s where women actually were not able to get jobs because they were married. So just because I haven't necessarily benefited, it doesn't mean that other women, and I really appreciate that. So I do think, and I should stress, it did have a role. Sorry? Sorry, I missed your question? Yeah, that would be fine, but we've actually moved way beyond that, you know, to the point where actually we are asking for equal outcomes. We are expecting men to do as much childcare and us to be in the workplace just as much. So, you know, the basic thing of equal rights. And there are some people who argue, and I'm not sure where I sit on this, there are some people who argue, well, we would have got equal rights even without feminism, and they look at laws about women in the workplace and universities and stuff, and they say, well, actually a lot of these laws were in the system before feminism became really active, and they were all brought through by men anyway. So, you know, there wasn't really, you know, when women wanted change, they got change, and maybe we would have got it without a massive movement. But I mean, my perspective is, yes, we needed feminism back then, and it did really useful things back then. We really, and now, you know, when you've got something, it's going along on a trajectory which is now becoming destructive. So it's kind of come to the end of its useful life, and we really need to get rid of it. I mean, that's where I would be coming from. I mean, one of the, when is because I was only supposed to have an hour, but is Paul?
He's running late.
He's running late.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh well, yeah. I mean, one of the things which I think is that feminism has done since I've got a captive audience, is that, you know, we've got this whole concept of toxic masculinity and, you know, men behaving really badly, and I kind of feel a little bit as if we've set up a situation where we've freed males from all these processes of commitment, and we've also taken away any meaning which they might get from working and being productively engaged. So I kind of think we've set up a system where we're actually encouraging, I mean, I'm not saying that they necessarily are behaving really badly, but we set up a system which would allow men's worst instincts to come out. So you kind of set up a system which actually, and then you say, well, we need feminism to help modify the behavior of these men. Whereas I would say, well, feminism, by taking away the link between reproduction and production, and by taking away the importance of commitment, has actually meant that men can just run wild. So I'd say feminism has actually created the problem, which feminism then says it is needed to